The snow had just begun to fall when Eleanor locked the front door of Sweet Marie's bakery for what she thought might be the last time. She stood alone on the sidewalk, her breath curling into the cold December air like tiny ghosts of the past, watching the soft yellow lights inside flicker against the frosted windows. The handmade sign that had once hung proudly above the entrance, now dulled by wind and time, read, "Sweet Marie's, baked with love since 1971, her mother's bakery." Her inheritance. Her life. It was quiet. Too quiet for a Saturday. 3. Years ago, this street had bustled with the footsteps of families grabbing scones before soccer games, of retirees sipping morning coffee and gossip, of children with frosting on their noses and chocolate crumbs on their cheeks. But now, across the street stood a bright, modern building with polished glass windows and corporate charm, the flagship store of Brew & Go, a national coffee chain that had come to Millfield with gleaming smiles and bottomless pockets. Eleanor's. Shoes crunched the fresh snow as she turned and walked to her car. Her hands trembled on the steering wheel, not from the cold, but from the exhaustion that clung to her bones. She'd made peace with many things in her life, the loss of her parents, a divorce she never spoke of, the dream of traveling that she shelved long ago. But letting go of the bakery, of Sweet Marie's? That was a goodbye she hadn't prepared for. Inside, the lights turned off one by one, but just as the final bulb dimmed, someone watched from the alleyway. 2 weeks earlier, Eleanor stood behind. The worn wooden counter of her bakery, the smell of cinnamon and fresh dough hanging in the air. There were only 2 customers, both regulars. Mr. Keating, who always ordered a plain croissant and left $1 in the tip jar without saying a word, and Mrs. Alvarez, who came in mostly for the company. "It's not the muffins, dear," Mrs. Alvarez would often say, placing a wrinkled hand over Eleanor's. "It's the warmth. This place has heart. That's rare these days." Eleanor smiled, grateful but heavy. The truth was, heart didn't pay rent. Heart didn't keep the ovens running or the freezer stocked. Heart didn't stand a chance against Brew & Go's aggressive pricing, flashy social media ads, or their free Wi-Fi and pumpkin chai foam trend of the week nonsense. She never said these things out loud. But the walls knew. The walls of Sweet Marie's had listened to her whisper over unpaid invoices and count coins at the end of the day. They had heard her sob in the early mornings before anyone arrived, and that day they listened again. As she read the letter she'd received from her landlord. Final notice. 1 month. Vacate or face legal action. She folded the letter and tucked it beneath the counter. Across town, a different kind of life was unfolding. Miles Shepard hadn't painted in 6 months. The canvas in front of him sat blank, mocking him. From its place near the cracked window of his studio apartment, he used to say color lived in his fingertips. Now they were just cold. Millfield was not kind to artists. At least not ones without connections or day jobs. Miles had tried murals, portrait commissions, even teaching. But lately, he could barely afford paint. He wandered the streets now, sketchpad in hand, drawing strangers in the park or the chipped corners of forgotten buildings. Not because anyone asked him to, because he didn't know how not to. On this particular Thursday, his feet carried him to the edge of Main Street. He hadn't been this far in months. Not since his last exhibit had bombed and the gallery director had kindly suggested he reconsider his audience. That's when he saw it. Sweet Marie's. It looked like something out of time. A warm glow. Through the windows, red and white awnings, and a tiny bell that jingled when he pushed open the door. Eleanor looked up from behind the counter. Surprised. Miles had a way of noticing things. And what he noticed most was the sadness behind her smile. It started with a sketch. He ordered a scone and coffee, then sat in the corner booth and began to draw, not with the hunger of someone trying to impress, but with the quiet reverence of someone trying to preserve. He drew the bakery, the counters, the coffee mugs with tiny chips in them, and Eleanor standing behind the counter like a lighthouse. When he left, he slipped the sketch into the tip jar. She found it hours later and stared at it for a long time. The next morning, Miles returned. "You drew this?" she asked. He nodded sheepishly. "It's beautiful," she said. He shrugged. "You've got good bones." They laughed. It was the first real laugh Eleanor had had in weeks. Over the next several days, Miles returned again and again, sometimes with a drawing, sometimes with just a smile. He offered to paint the bakery's windows with holiday scenes for free. At first, Eleanor hesitated. She didn't like charity, but something about Miles, the quiet kindness, the way he spoke about colors like they had feelings, softened her. So he painted snowflakes, cinnamon rolls that danced, a golden retriever with a chef's hat inspired by her childhood pet. She told him. People started stopping to look. Then to take photos. Then to come in. Teenagers posed outside for Instagram. Parents brought their kids to see the magic windows. Bloggers posted about the hidden gem bakery with the art that made you feel something. Sales went up. Not drastically, but enough to make Eleanor wake up with a little more hope. One afternoon, as Miles was finishing a mural inside the bakery, a breathtaking piece that told the story of Sweet Marie's history in a swirl of flour, faces, and family, Eleanor came up behind him. "I don't know why you're doing this," she said, "but thank you." He turned, brushing a smudge of blue from his cheek. "I think places like this are important. They hold people together." Eleanor swallowed the lump in her throat. Later that evening, she did something she hadn't done in years. She called the landlord and asked for 2 more months. "I might have a chance," she said. "Just give me 2 months." The community began to notice. Mrs. Alvarez told her entire church. Mr. Keating brought his daughter, who was a local food blogger. The town councilwoman came in one morning, had a cinnamon bun, and posted a photo with the caption, "Support local, support stories, support Sweet Marie's." By the end of the month, Eleanor had a line out the door. One local paper did a write-up. Another station sent a camera crew. "Who's the artist?" they asked. Miles didn't want the spotlight, but Eleanor made him stand next to her for the photo anyway. On Christmas Eve, the bakery was packed. Snow dusted the windows. Children sang carols on the sidewalk. Miles stood in the corner, quiet, watching it all unfold. Eleanor pulled him aside. "You saved this place," she said. He shook his head. "You saved me too, you know." They looked at each other, and in that moment, something shifted. Something healed. 3 months later, Sweet Marie's was thriving. Eleanor paid off her back rent. She hired 2 new employees. She started a weekly event called Art and Pastry, where locals could showcase their talents. And in the back of the shop, a new mural had gone up. One that told the story of 2 strangers who found each other in the dark and turned a fading bakery into a beacon of light. If this story moved you, if it reminded you of the quiet power of kindness and community, then we invite you to be part of that story. Like, comment, and share this video with someone who believes in second chances. Subscribe to The Kind Story for more heartwarming tales just like this one. And don't forget to tell us, what's one act of kindness that changed your life? Because sometimes the smallest gestures create the biggest waves, and sometimes a stranger's kindness really can save a dream.